Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Pink Floyd album ranking saga. If you've watched the two previous videos, you know that we are doing a series. We are going to rank every Pink Floyd studio album, all the way from worst at number 15 to best at number 1, and this is the start of it. So as you saw by the title, in my opinion, my ranking, of course, these are all my opinions, the worst Pink Floyd studio album, Edie, not doing any outtakes, easy decision, absolutely, at number 15, we have Ummagumma. So let's talk about it before I completely slander this album. So this is a wonderful album. It's an interesting one. This is their fourth studio album. There's the back. Came out in November of '69. It was the last album of the 60s. And it's an interesting album. It was the first double album Pink Floyd ever made, which is not all that unusual. But the layout and the recording and structuring of how this album is written and recorded, that's what's strange about it. So the first disc, the first record, is a live album that features 4 songs recorded at 2 different sessions in '69, 2 different concerts. That's not really that unusual. Then you have the second disc, which is the studio album, which is 5 tracks. 3 of them are suites, 2 of them are regular songs, and we'll talk about how that was written. So the live album is 4 tracks. It features live performances of Astronomy Domine, which that would be track 1. It features the very infamous and amazingly awesome Careful With That Axe, Eugene. Really the only time that song actually appeared on an album. It was never on a studio album, but it appeared on here. And then on the side 2 of that, you have Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, which sounds awesome live, and you have a live performance of A Saucer Full of Secrets. The 3 songs I mentioned first, because A Saucer Full of Secrets is a long song already, but the first 3 songs on this album were all stretched. So Astronomy Domine, Careful With That Axe, and Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, those songs were all stretched to almost 10 minutes. Those songs to begin with are between 4 or 5 minutes. It's very rare to find, but there is kind of a studio recording of Careful With That Axe. It's not well known, but it's short. It's like 3 or 4 minutes, but all 3 of those tracks were stretched to almost 10 minutes. Astronomy Domine and Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun especially sound amazing. They are especially Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. It is just beautiful listening to it on this album live. And of course you have A Saucer Full of Secrets, which is a absolutely sublime listening experience already, let alone live. So, you know, I'm talking, say, oh, this album sucks. Why am I talking so good about it? Well, in my opinion, the live album is what makes this album great. It is beautiful. Any early any early recording of Pink Floyd live is amazing. Granted, '69 is a little bit late to be considered early Pink Floyd. You know, Syd Barrett's already well out of the band, but it sounds beautiful and amazing and crisp on this album. That is what I really like. The reason why it is number 15 is the studio album, which, if you don't know, this album features 5 tracks on the studio album, and the idea was for each member of the band at the time, David, Rick, Nick, Roger, to have half of one side of a record to create a suite of sorts, a long kind of song that they wrote, they composed, they played on, whatever. And so that's, for all intents and purposes, that's what you have. The first track, or tracks I should say, because it's one, but it's got 4 parts. The first piece you hear on the studio side is Sisyphus, written, no outtakes, written by Rick Wright. Has 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing named. Then you have tracks 3 and 4, which were Roger Waters' contributions. Now, the reason why you have 3 and 4 instead of just 2, I'm sorry, 2 and 3, not 3 and 4. But Roger Waters' main contribution was a song called Grantchester Meadows, which is, you know, it's an alright song, we'll talk about that. But the problem was, that song was not long enough to take up the entire side of the record. So because of that, Roger had to create another song. And so you get track 3, which is called Several Species of Small Free Animals Gathered Together in a Cave and Grooving with a Pict. We will talk about that one. So that concludes side 3, if you want to call it that, or side 1 of the studio album. And then side 4 or 2 of the studio album features The Narrow Way, which is David Gilmour's contribution. It's 3 parts. And the last track is called The Grand Vizier's Garden Party, which is Nick Mason's contribution. And it is 3 parts named, actually. You have Entrance, which is about a minute long. You have Entertainment, which is about 6 minutes long. And you have Exit, which is about a minute long. So now that I've discussed what the album is, why do I hate it? I don't hate it. Like I mentioned, the studio album is ungodly good. It is amazing. It is beautiful. It is one of my favorite recordings of early Pink Floyd is on this album. The problem is the studio album. This album, keep in mind that up until this point, Pink Floyd only had 3 albums released. Piper, which was all of Syd Barrett's material, short, sweet, whimsical. You had A Saucer Full of Secrets, which was, okay, Barrett's gone, but his influence is still here. He's got some playing credits. He's still playing a little bit. We got a little bit more longer, drawn-out songs, a little bit more cool, psychedelic. Then you had More, which was, of course, the soundtrack, which is kind of like shorter songs, but less Syd Barrett-like and more Roger David-like. And then you have this. Up until that point, the band really hadn't experimented with really long, crazy, psychedelic pieces. You know, over 10 minutes long. Granted, you had A Saucer Full of Secrets, but the just pure, insane sound effect, crazy, experimental, avant-garde type stuff hadn't been seen before. And this was the first example of it. First up on the studio album is Sisyphus, like I mentioned, and honestly, I don't like that. I don't like that track one bit. It's about 12 minutes in length, and it has some parts that are okay, and some parts that I just can't stand. And I'm one of those people that will be a proponent of Pink Floyd. People say, oh, it's just noise, and I'm like, no, it's not. You don't get it, you don't get it. This track is noise. And as much as I love Rick Wright, this track bombs. It is not good. It is one of the only Pink Floyd tracks where I'm like, is this over yet? This is annoying. So, not off to a great start with Sisyphus. Then you have Grantchester Meadows, which actually might be my favorite song on the studio album side. It's almost good, if I do say so myself. It's very soft, very calm, very much just, acoustic guitar, Roger's lyrics, very simple song, kind of like If on Adam Hart Mother, if you want to compare it in a way. Very soft, very gentle song. Kind of brings you back into like, okay, we've listened to Sisyphus as a cluster of whatever that was. Now let's have a better song. Then you have Several Species, which, if you don't know what that is, if you think the name is a joke, it's not. Several Species is a 5-minute long recording of Roger Waters and David Gilmour making animal noises with their mouths, tapping on the microphone like this, and just layers of that over and over and over. It is almost headache-inducing, honestly. It is just straight animal noises. If you don't believe me, go listen to it. I'm not kidding. Then it ends with Roger Waters reciting a poem in a very heavy Scottish, I think Scottish, maybe Irish, Scottish accent. It's bad. It's just straight bad. It is not a song. It is not music. It is noise. That is where I will agree with the Pink Floyd, haters. That is just noise. Okay, side 1 over. It was a little rough. Then you go to side 2, which features The Narrow Way, which honestly, out of all of the songs on this studio album, I think The Narrow Way, if I had to pick a favorite, you're kind of picking which songs are better, or which crap is better than the other crap. I think The Narrow Way is probably my favorite of the 3 suites. I think Grantchester Meadows, if I had to pick a favorite song off the studio, it would have to be that, by default. But Narrow Way is tolerable, much more tolerable than Sisyphus. It's very Led Zeppelin-y, in my opinion, if I have to be honest. It sounds kind of Led Zeppelin-y, but not horrible. It's classic Gilmour, even though Gilmour says, oh, I didn't know what I was doing when I recorded that. It's tolerable. Not great, but tolerable. And then the last one you have the Garden Party, Grand Vizier's Garden Party, which is a short flute intro, which actually sounds nice. a 6-minute drum solo, but it's not a typical drum solo. It's a Nick Mason Pink Floyd drum solo, which means it sounds absolutely terrifying. And then you have Exit, which is another rendition of the flute solo, but it's a little different, a little shorter. Because I'm a drummer at heart and I played drums for years, I do have to, you know, kind of say, oh, Garden Party is kind of cool. Kind of. Is it my favorite? Well, I think I'd still rather listen to The Narrow Way, but I would much rather listen to the Garden Party than Sisyphus. It's tolerable. But, you know, again, you have to pick, these are all great albums, but I have to pick my least favorite. I don't think there's a single Pink Floyd album I would pick up after listening to this. I think if I had to listen to them all in order of like to dislike, this would be last by far. And if I had, you know, if I had to never listen to a Pink Floyd album again, which I hope never is the case, that would be a horrible way to live, it would have to be this one. And as much as the studio album is so good, it is unfortunately canceled out by the disaster, the live album, sorry, the disaster of a studio album that we have. And, you know, it's a shame because, again, the live album is so good, but man, the studio album just isn't there. And the funny thing is I bought this record at, I don't remember where I got this, but I was at a record show and someone else had a copy of this and I picked it up and as I was looking at it and they said, you know, that is my favorite Pink Floyd album right there. So experimental there. And I'm like, if by experimental you mean on a 5-minute track, sure. But nonetheless, this seems to be a lot of people's least favorite, and I get it. I totally understand it. The cover is interesting. You've got, you know, Gilmore, Roger. You got David, Roger, Nick, Rick. Something I didn't know about this album until recently, and I learned it, and I'm embarrassed I didn't realize it. These pictures, 1, 2, 3, are not mirror images of each other, because in this one you have Roger sitting here, David back there, Rick, Nick. And here it looks like you have Nick, Rick, I assume David, and then Roger. So they're actually not the same. And I learned that and I was like, wow, I didn't know that. Very small printing up here, but you can see here, this is actually the cover of A Saucer Full of Secrets. They threw it on there. It was their last kind of studio album. There's a couple different variations of this album. The UK original release versions on this white square here have the soundtrack from Gigi, the movie, written here, like literally a picture pretty much of it. But when it came time to release it in the US, they cropped the Gigi part out because they didn't want it to get a copyright strike in the US. The Australian versions don't even have this white square here. They completely airbrushed it out. But another way to tell if you have an earlier or a later one is that the later version, not later, but the not initial releases of these albums had writing up here that said something like special by 2 LPs something. It said it like somewhere up here. Mine doesn't say that. And then of course you have the back, which is the band on a runway strip, kind of cool. Being a double album, it does have an inside here, which is pretty much black and white photos of the band, although they're kind of hard to see. You have David Gilmour here, Roger here, Rick here, and Nick's all on the bottom. So, and then I don't have, maybe they came with different sleeves. Mine have just paper sleeves that hold the vinyl, you know, used album. I don't have the original, no, it's not going to fit correctly. There we go. I've got the old school, you know, paper sleeves. I don't have the originals, but whatever. Oh, that's awesome. Again, not doing any outtakes. So, I don't really know if I have much to say about this album, but yeah, easy pick for me, last one. In fact, I actually went and I re-listened to it again like this week because I figured, okay, maybe I'm going to give it another listen and I'm going to see if I can't like it. Because the first time I ever listened to this album all the way through, keep in mind that as a child, the only Pink Floyd I really started listening to was, you know, Dark Side, The Wall, Animal, stuff like that. I didn't get into this kind of stuff until I was an early teenager, you know, 13, 14. So when I got this vinyl, I said, all right, I can finally listen to Ummagumma, hear what everyone's been talking about. I listened to the live album, I said, oh my God, that is ungodly. How could the studio album top that? And I was very correct. I put that studio album on, and once I was into Sisyphus about 3 or 4 minutes, I said, okay, this is terrible. When does this end? And then I understood why people don't like it. So, you know, it's an interesting one. And it was one of the only Pink Floyd albums I've ever listened to where I straight up was like, how much longer of this is there? And so, you know, it's kind of one of those things. And I tried when I listened to it recently, I actually listened to the studio album first because I figured, okay, the first time I ever listened to this album, I listened to the live album. Okay, I've listened to a 40-minute album. Now I'm going to listen to the other side. And an album like The Wall kind of captivates you and keeps you there so you don't feel like you're listening to an hour and a half of music. This does not. This feels, you can feel every minute ticking away, the moments that make up a no, random joke I didn't mean to put in there. But even listening to the studio album first and then the live album, I couldn't. It didn't do anything. I was kind of hoping, okay, I went and listened to, I had my list made and I went and listened to some of the bottom albums again, trying to see maybe can I move them up just a little bit. I couldn't with this one. I really don't feel bad about having this be in number 15. It deserves it, in my opinion. So, okay, I don't think I have anything else to say about this one other than that it is kind of crap. I feel so, you know, it's not crap, but compared to the other Pink Floyd albums, it kind of is. Oh, and then I think one of the other cover differences I forgot to mention, I think some of the later ones didn't say Pink Floyd down here. I think once they started putting the writing, maybe they changed it down here. I don't know. But that is going to be it. Thank you all for watching this very first episode of Pink Floyd Albums Ranked. I will see you in the next one for number 14. So thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, look forward to number 14, and check out Isaac24.com. Bye-bye.